During this outline of the cycling of matter, you're going to explore energy flow in a community and explore the recycling of matter in a living system. When plants and animals die, they start to decay. Decomposers break down that decay and return nutrients into the soil. Plants take up that nutrients to live in the soil. Introduction. An ecosystem is made up of biotic and abiotic factors. These factors shape the interactions in their ecosystem. A biological community depends on other organisms, and those other organisms help complete the biological community. Please keep in mind when you're looking at these slides that the information in yellow you need to write down in your notes or you need to summarize in your notes. Continuing, in just one ecosystem there are a lot of food chains. A food chain can be used to show the transfer of energy from one organism to another through the ecosystem by the process called feeding. Energy starts from the sun. Sunlight is the source of energy for an ecosystem. Plants and other organisms could not live without the sun's energy. The sun's energy is known as radiant energy. Plants or producers make their own food from radiant energy. Radiant energy helps the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a series of chemical reactions where radiant energy from the sun reacts with water and carbon dioxide to form chemical energy that is stored in sugar bonds. This process is called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process that happens in plants, and that stored energy can be passed to another organism when that other organism consumes the plant. Please take note of the formula using compound bonds at the bottom of the page. That will need to be written down on your notes page. When energy is transferred, a living system must get that energy from food. Plants and some unicellular organisms use radiant energy or light energy from the sun to make their food. All other organisms consume another organism to get food. In the same way, this bird gets energy from the snail. That energy is transferred from the snail to the bird. All organisms are classified by the way they obtain energy. Question number 1. Where does radiant energy come from? Hopefully, you said the sun. A consumer or a heterotroph is an organism that obtains energy by consuming another organism. A herbivore is a herbivore is an animal that eats plants. That could be like a cow, a rabbit, or a grasshopper. Those are all herbivores. Another consumer is a carnivore. They eat meat, or they eat other herbivores, like wolves, lions. Those are all carnivores. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. Bears, humans, mockingbirds are all examples of an omnivore. How do you think a mockingbird is an example of an omnivore? And depending on how the different consumers feed, they can be arranged in a food chain to illustrate how energy gets transformed through the ecosystem. Trophic levels, the flow of energy. Each step of the food chain or food web is called a trophic level. The levels are arranged in order from who feeds on who. Autotrophs, or producers, are always the first level in all ecosystems. After that will be the primary consumer, and then above them is the secondary consumer. Please keep in mind of the arrow direction. Producer to primary. The arrow is pointing at the primary consumer. At the very top of the trophic levels are found tertiary consumers. These tertiary consumers are at the top of the food chain, or the top predator of the food chain. Very rarely does a food chain have more than 5 levels. Question number 2. In a food chain, which of the following would you find on the trophic level immediately above producers? Hopefully you said primary consumer. A primary consumer is right above a producer. A food chain. A food chain is a series of steps which organisms transfer energy by eating or being eaten from another or by another organism. A food chain is a simple model that shows how energy flows through an ecosystem. The flow of energy is always one way, into the consumer. The picture here shows a typical grassland food chain. The plant, the producer, we got the herbivore, the grasshopper, the mouse may be an omnivore, and then our carnivorous snake. Question number 3. Examine the food chain. Energy passes from what? Hopefully you said the C, berries to small bird. Small bird to berries would mean the berries are eating the small bird. Bird of prey to small bird would mean the small bird eats the bird of prey. Berries to small bird, which means the small bird eats the berries, which is the correct answer. And D, well, we know energy is going on, so that one is totally incorrect. And a food web is a very complex food chain. In this model shown to you in the slide, there are 5 food chains, and there are 4 trophic levels. We have our producers, our primary, our secondary, and then our top predator. Feeding relationships are usually more complex than a single food chain model can show. Most organisms feed on more than one species. A food web is a model that shows all the possible feeding relationships in an ecosystem. Food webs give a more accurate picture of how energy flows in an ecosystem than food chains. More often, if one disappears from the food chain, the other organisms can survive by feeding from different organisms. This, however, affects the number of organisms elsewhere on the food chain. Imagine this: if the rabbit disappeared, where would the fox get its food? Where would the cougar get its food? What would happen to the trees and shrubs that the animal ate? The vanished animal ate. We will discuss this in class. Please write down any questions that you have so far. Question number 4. Which of the following provides a complete view of the feeding relationship in an ecosystem? A food web or a food chain? Hopefully you said food web. A food web gives a complete picture of all of the animals and who they feed on. Ecological pyramids. A pyramid or an energy pyramid, ecological pyramid, all the different pyramids you're going to see is an example of the amount of energy or matter in an ecosystem can be represented by one of these pyramids. A pyramid is a diagram that shows the relative amounts of energy or matter combined within each trophic level in a food chain or food web. Please keep in mind, and you need to label your notes with the pyramid information. Here you can see that there are groups of plants at the very bottom with 5,000 joules of energy. As the consumers eat, there will be a 10% available of energy for the next level in the pyramid. 90% of the energy is used in or by the organism. This is not your typical pyramid. You can see that there is one massive oak tree with a large amount of energy at the bottom of the pyramid. However, the ladybugs and green flies eat from that tree. The green fly has a large ecosystem within, or a large microhabitat in the tree. Things are not always what they may seem. A single tree has a large amount of energy, yet it is a single tree. Look at the organism, green fly. Why does the ladybug only get 200 joules of energy from the previous trophic level? We will discuss this answer in class, but it is a good question to think about. Energy pyramids. Remember, the consumer uses 90% of the energy at their trophic level and then pass on only 10% of the remaining energy. This is because of a couple of reasons. Not all parts are eaten, and chemical energy is used by the organisms for the 7 life processes. A food chain is a large in a food chain, a large percentage of the energy, 90%, is used at the trophic level. The next trophic level only gets 10% of the energy. Animal skeletons are some things that cannot be eaten by some animals. Also, the 7 life processes include movement, reproduction, sensitivity, nutrition, excretion, respiration, growth. An energy pyramid can take into account the energy production in a food chain. Each bar represents the amount of energy measured in joules in each trophic level. As you go up the food chain, 10% is only given to the next level. Recycling of matter. When plants and animals die, their dead organic remains become a biomass. Biomass, or total mass of the living matter in a trophic level. When they die, a process of decomposition or decay happens. A bacteria or fungi will start to break down the dead tissue and release the stored energy back into the soil. Composting. You will need to summarize this information on your notes. However, this is an example of what will happen. The dead organisms start to decay. The materials from the decomposer take the nutrients back into the soil, and the cycle goes over. Death and decay go to the decomposers, and then finally the decomposers leave the nutrients so that the nutrients in the soil can be taken up by the plants. Gardeners use this same process for composting. They want that controlled condition where animals die or plants die, and they're able to use the decomposing material to help bring the nutrients back into the soil. Again, the decomposers take the nutrients and put it back into the soil so that plants can take up that nutrients. Composting. In a small area, a human or a person can make a compost bin. These is carefully used by gardeners to control things by turning materials and adding small amounts of water to help with the decomposition or the compost bin. After a year or more, the contents may become dark, sweet smelling material that is rich in nutrients. This nutrient-rich material is added to the soil as a fertilizer. Question 6. Which group of organisms break down dead organisms, releasing nutrients into the soil, and is the last stop of the food chain? Hopefully you said decomposers. Thank you very much. Good job on your notes. During this outline of the cycling of matter, you explored how energy enters and flows through the ecosystem. and how energy is recycled between food chains. Thank you very much. Great job on your notes. I look forward to seeing you in class.